tonight. I slept through the natural light, but I'll do it if it feels alright. Alright, alright,
Welcome to the Central Coast Poetry Shows, and I'm your host, Jim Russo. My reason for producing this show is this. For about 10 years, I've been reading and attending poetry readings all over California's Central Coast. And during that time, I've had the great privilege of hearing and seeing some very talented poets read their own words. This show is to be a platform for those poets to be seen and heard by you. Now, here's a few facts about my first guest, Rosie King. Rosie King was born in Saginaw, Michigan, went east to Wellesley College, came west in the 60s for graduate school, and taught the beginning poetry workshop at UC Santa Cruz in the 80s, while finishing a dissertation on the poetry of H.D. Her first book, Sweetwater, Saltwater, was published by Hummingbird Press in 2007. A new collection, Time and Peonies, came out last year, also with Hummingbird. And 7 of her poems were read by Garrison Keillor on Writer's Almanac. She is grateful to be living here where she first landed in Santa Cruz, close to the beach, in a house where poets like to meet. And now I'd like to introduce you to Rosie King. Welcome to our show, Rosie.
Thank you, Jim.
Now tell me, what would you like to talk about today?
I would like first to say how grateful I am to the Hummingbird Poets and the Hummingbird Press. There are numerous Hummingbird poets, and the fact that I have 2 books published is largely due to all of their support. And our books are in Bookshop Santa Cruz, available online from the Hummingbird Press website. And without this group, they meet at my house, and so does a small editing group, and most of them are also hummingbirds. I may not have these 2 books, and so I'm extremely grateful to this community of poets here. There's a wonderful community of poets in Santa Cruz, as you are drawing on some of us, and I hope that some of the other Hummers can be on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to keep going. So
yes, you are.
We're not for a lack of poets, I'll tell you that, in Santa Cruz.
This is
a lot of people that still want to be on the show. So
this is so wonderful.
we can keep going for a while.
Yes. So the other thing I want to say is that being from Saginaw, Michigan, I am originally a Midwesterner. And one of the big influences on my poetry comes from my hometown. The Pulitzer Prize-winning Theodore Retke was our hometown poet, and I've had numerous chances to read in my hometown, which not every poet gets to do, which is wonderful. And without his sister, who was very strict and taught everybody 9th grade English, I also might not know where a comma goes. And she was magnificent. And as someone who taught poetry for a while, that was, I just always credited her.
What a fabulous experience. Yeah. We're going to move along now. And what I'm going to ask you is, of all the poems you've written, do you have a favorite?
Well, I have 2. And I'd like to start reading with each of those. The first one is I Flew Low Over Gratiot Road. And the reason this is such a favorite is that, first of all, it was magic. It came from a dream, as numbers of my poems do. And it was also the poem that I was asked to, if I could, write a poem for Theodore Retke's centennial celebration.
Wow.
And he's been celebrated on his birthday in Saginaw, Michigan, ever since he died, which was way back in the 60s, and that's still happening. And so this poem was just so beloved by so many people, mine somehow, because they wanted to, honor Retke.
Well, I want to hear it.
Yeah,
so
I'll start with that one.
I'm going to ask you to step to the podium,
Okay.
and if you'd read those 2 poems first, and then give us some more.
Sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rosie King.
I flew low over Gratiot Road. The weeds believed me, and the nesting birds. The worms were delighted as wrens. Those are 2 lines from Theodore Retke's poem, A Field of Light. I flew low over Gratiot Road. For the dew on the lilacs, I let one foot, the other, dip down above the roofs of the houses of my childhood. Let my light body graze the blossoming tops of the chestnut trees, candelabras all the way to the cemetery, and there slip into the tunnel we go to, the scent of hyacinths, the wet green fur sprouting from the stones. Old South School. This is out of a memory. I actually walked this for this poem. Old South School, the sidewalk my feet once knew in every weather, still heads straight to the corner of Martin's drugstore, still turns north on Elm, where the white-belted boys on safety patrol held their arms out for us, past the red and white pole at Mickey's, King of Crew Cuts, and stops at the little flight of steps, plinth of chipped concrete by the kindergarten door, locked. It's summer and all the windows now stuccoed muddy brown, so even when the kids are at their desks, they can't see out. I want my yellow slicker, my locker by the art room stairs, where once in a morning of thunder, from the stairwell's high window, dark clouds blew away, and just in time for walking home, the sun poured down. A crow now, flapping and cawing high above the west steps, and there on top of the entrance columns, stone claws clinging to the eaves, tiny gargoyles grinning. I walked back and forth from kindergarten to 9th grade to that school. Saturdays, a whiff of eggs and bacon, my red plaid shirt with snaps, blue jeans that zip up the side. I'm running downstairs, my mother's laughing, still in her apron, on her tiptoes, on her tiptoes for the picnic basket. My father's calling from the basement stairs, already pulling his high tops on. My brothers scrambling in the hall closet for theirs. I grab my toast. Strawberry jam. We're going. We're on the running board into the velvety back of the old blue Chrysler. Past the putting greens, the cemetery, over the Tippawasee on its bumpy bridge, to the straight gravel road by fields and woods, and on to the turn at last, the new green sign to our farm. Split rail fences, first apple trees, past Shad and Mary's paint-peeled shack, up the little hill by the root cellar. Here's the farm bell on its post, the yellow brick house, the old red barns, the silvery silo, 40 acres, pine woods beyond, the sweet dry smell of hay, the steamy stench of manure, and now for us, the white-plumed whinnies of horses. Those last 2 were from my first book, Sweetwater, Saltwater, and the rest will be back in with Time and Peonies. Mary in the basement. Monday morning, down went the sheets, towels, all the shirts in the house. Same old tune, muttering up the clothes chute. You were sorting, coloreds and whites. No pockets turned out. And what about that old stain? Ironing. Each corner, tuck, and pleat you knew. All those blouses, frilly dresses. Too fancy, you said. Who you think you are, Miss Muffet? Hot days, it was cool down there. Can't walk so good, you said. Clothes don't fit. Sometimes you smoked, and once an eye was bruised. We found a bottle in the chute. After that, my mother said you had to leave. How did you live out there in that farm shack, garden patch, black-eyed peas and goat, one lonely son, and Shad turning you out for some young thing? Come back. Let all your grumbling shake that basement room till up the stairs you come bursting into the kitchen to speak. To rise. I begin to sing of rich-haired Demeter. It's a line from Homer. Each loaf plumped, the edges tucked under as my mother's fingers taught. I lie in sunlight on the floor and look up. Here all this time, in the redwood ceiling's grain, beak to nose, hair pulled back, a silhouette as in a frieze. She stands facing east, long-limbed, reaching up her arms, as if to begin her ancient devotions. She's taken a breath. The warm bread rises. My task, to push away, and yet feel the pull, like Persephone. How else, after long wandering, to settle in my own house, with these mounds of wheat, poppy seeds, honey and oil, a little salt, the mystery of yeast. Reaching back for Grossma. Hannah, Marie, Sophie, Wilhelmina, Mefsman, Nagel. She had all those names. 1850 to 1933. It was the Great War. German taken out of America's schools. When their friends came to play, my mother and her brothers would hush and hide their Grossma in the back room. Ach du lieber, they knew she'd say, shaming everyone. Alone there, still dressed in black from the flu epidemic and Grosspa dead, and who knows how many lost in the war in the old country. What did Grossma Sophie think in her mother tongue that she didn't say to that granddaughter with the curls, my mother Violet, born in America, tongue and pen shaping English words? She'd show me how Sophie held a loaf of dark rye in the crook of her arm to slice it. How her bare feet could scoot across the white pine floor of her kitchen, that clean. No telling what Sophie could have told of the church bells that rang in old Berlin, the horse-drawn cart that carried her there, the aunt with red cheeks, the one with a limp, whose names she bore, the kin who kissed her, patted her belly, wished her luck on the dock of the river Havel, then grew smaller and smaller, waving goodbye. Some nights you're blessed. Among trees, people you've never seen mingle warmth from hand to hand and melt until they are beams of light woven into a rope that tugs you in, where a man whose eyes sparkle into yours lifts his young girl. This is my daughter. She puts her face close to yours. You say, hello, beauty. She says, hello, love. The light of day, the splash of water on your face, daffodils burning in their blue and white vase, the calendar open to 2 jays on a branch. It's spring, the first day.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosie King. Adela Najarro is the author of 3 poetry collections, Split Geography, Twice Told Over, and My Children's, a chapbook that includes teaching resources.
Yes.
With My Children's, she hopes to bring Latina poetry into the high schools and college classrooms so that students can explore poetry identity, and what it means to be a person of color in the U.S. society. Her extended family's immigration from Nicaragua to San Francisco began in the 1940s and concluded in the 80s when the last of her family settled in Los Angeles area. She currently teaches creative writing, literature, and composition at Cabrillo College. Every spring semester, she teaches a Poetry for the People workshop at Cabrillo, where students explore personal voice and social justice through poetry and spoken word. She holds a doctorate in literature and creative writing from Western Michigan University, as well as an MFA from Vermont College, and is widely published in numerous anthologies and literary magazines. And without further ado, my friend Adela Najarro. Hi, Adela. Adela.
Hi, Jim. How are you?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
So, what would we like to talk about today?
Well, how poetry can be an act of social justice, both for the writer and for people who read and enjoy it, and audiences. So, as a teacher at Cabrillo College, that Poetry for the People workshop, that comes from June Jordan. She started that at UC Berkeley, and I've tried to adapt it for our community. And the central idea is that writing your own voice, your own truth, not only empowers you, but empowers the listener, empowers your community, and we can learn from each other, right? And the more that we learn about each other, I think the better we are as a world, and especially in these times,
Absolutely.
right? That we need to hear all these voices and struggles and triumphs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So many people need a voice right now.
Yes, yes.
They're just not being heard.
Right. And here in Santa Cruz, we have a good diverse population. People go, there's the classes at Cabrillo College. There's the Word Church over at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. There's the Emeralds Writing Group. Mm-hmm. There's so many different venues that you can go through and participate with poetry to the way that it fits you. And that's the one thing, if I had 30 seconds, would be write. Don't worry about it, judgment. Write your truth. Write it out. And then if you're brave enough, share it with somebody else, go to an open mic, take a class, and then if you're really on fire, then you can start to learn the craft of it, manipulating language. And there's so much joy in that. Mm-hmm. Like I'm sure there's joy in you hosting this program.
There is.
Right.
There is. It's good. And to go back to what you said earlier, we've had, well, it was my initial impetus for the show was to have all the hosts on all the readings that I've been going to for 10 years on the show, to let people know that you can go to the library at the Main Street Library with Len Anderson, or you can go to the Porter Library in Soquel, which I was at yesterday reading. Or as you mentioned, the Word Church, and there's so many others, and I've had them all on now.
Yeah, and I think I've been to all of them.
From San Francisco,
it's wonderful.
exactly, from San Francisco to San Jose to Santa Cruz to Monterey. So I'm trying to give everyone an opportunity to know where all those avenues are.
That's great.
But and it's been fun.
That's
been
great.
fun.
That's great.
So what else would you like to speak to?
That's my main one there, that I really want to have people to go out and create their own voices, as I've created my voice. So being a Latina and a writer, a long time I learned that my voice matters, that what I have to say matters, and just because my family's from Nicaragua, so it's a Latino population in the United States, but it's not the dominant one. It's not the major one, so maybe people don't know the Nicaraguan experience or the Latino story. But all of these stories are U.S. American stories, right? So you can have the Mexican story, the Chicano story, the Guatemalan story, the El Salvadorian story, the Nicaraguan story. And what it is that we're all part of the United States. And that's only in the Latino area. And I didn't mention Puerto Ricanos, and from Cuba, from the Dominican Republic.
Right.
And there's diversity means understanding everybody in their complexity, without judgment, right? And so it goes with the Latino, but it's also African American, bicultural.
Right.
You can go out from race into gender and gender identity and all these things. And once we start doing that, we get this freedom. So writing and creativity can lead to personal freedom and hopefully societal freedom.
Well, I ask all my guests, of all the poems you've written, do you have a favorite?
I do, and it's one called My Children's. And it sounds like it's a mistake, but what it is, since I work with so many people, Spanish speakers who are learning English, many times will say my children's. And I'm like, they know how to speak English. Why are they saying my children's? And I translated it, and it goes to mijos. And in Spanish, mijos is a term of endearment. Like you go, ven acá, mijos, right? But you don't do that with children. Come here, my children. It doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So they change it, the English, to my children's, to give that mijos feeling to English.
Okay.
And so that's the title of one of my books because of that, because it's like a loving call to children, to our children, all of our children. And the title poem is my favorite.
Well, thank you for that translation. Now I'm going to ask you to step to the podium,
Okay.
read that poem first, and then give us some more.
All right, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adela Najarro.
To my children's. I call you Hun, for honey, honeybee, be my honey. After each flower, fly home, wrapped in football, geometry, and various shades of skin, caramel, chocolate, vanilla, hazelnut. Fly home with a deep cinnamon tan, though I will always know there's a vanilla pudding belly under that shirt. My children's, la gran mestizaje de las Americas. But be more than careful. The world expects you to get in trouble. A brick smashed window, a chocolate bar slid into a pocket, copying answers on that test. Don't do it. The big there, the big them, whiteness, power, societal structures of post-racial America where they are blinded by a snowstorm of reasons why not in my neighborhood. I'll wait for you to fail. It's expected for you to kick Romeo and Juliet across the parking lot. No one will notice. As you stare out the window when the teacher annotates the connections between metaphors and reality. These are passing grades. A girl is a biatch with gold grills glisten, celebrity status. Don't do it. You're expected to end up in jail, divorced, homeless, unemployed, raging, and violent, not understanding why. You had to read Malcolm X to discover your own vitality. Jesus isn't a white man with blue eyes. You're not supposed to know that covered wagons were stealth bombers setting off genocide. That before corporations rolled over family farms, those families removed. Cherokee, Shawnee, the mothers, the fathers, the children, my children, our children. The childrens of brown cinnamon warm spice have danced on shotgun shells, Bowie knives, and shards of glass. You are supposed to drop out of high school and never go to college, never read Frederick Douglass or Eduardo Galeano. Don't take that sociology class. History is boring. God is dead. Religion an opiate. Get a job. Go to work. Don't you want that nice black muscle car with silver gray lining and midnight rims? Don't do it. Graduate. Go to college. My children's. The Godhead grows from palm fronds, deep night stars, waves of heat and humidity wrapped around the equator. We are all divine. My children's. You have a responsibility to rise above inundating waves of indifference and invisibility. Stand up, be seen, listen to your own voice. You are right. The world is not fair. You are not privileged, but you are strong. Raise your hand, open a book, rise. Discover you are elemental, a comet raised from stardust, shoot through nighttime sky, spiral through the universe. So my family is from Nicaragua, and I only went back once when I was 14, and I always wanted to go back, and so I always write poems about it. After the 1979 Revolución Nicaragüense, my parents' history was erased. Their Nicaragua, gone forever. My mother believes I will be assaulted if I return to Managua. My father refuses to go with me. They wrestle memories of what was playing on the radio and a humidity that did not cease. I wonder about evenings where green parrots fly into an overbearing canopy while iguanas sit low and watch. The iguana knows how to run when shadows arise loose from bodies, dormant and dead. In 1920, after Rubén Darío's death, the entire nation agreed to rename a city in his honor. His birthplace, Metapa, became Ciudad Darío, poetry being the national pastime. But then Somoza, armed men in jeeps, ghost shadows dancing on skin, all too often. As Nicaragua's poetic sweetheart, Darío conjured mermaids diving deep in Lake Managua and swans sailing slowly on the ponds of a golden palace. He set a lyrical backdrop for a land where my mother's hair was tied up in ribbons as she skipped past a garden where a peacock spread royal blue and a rose was cut only to droop in a vase by the window. Sometimes imaginative sonnets allow us to escape. Bone-skinned children, bloated seagulls, cathedrals where incense burned shame. As the revolutionary hurricane swept coffee plantations clean, green humidity clung at right angles on reptilian scales, while Darío's mermaids choked in the fresh air. And my family came to San Francisco, and that's where we all were. I was born there. San Francisco never keeps me. It always says go, so now I'm here in Santa Cruz, which is I love just as much. So this poem is San Francisco. My great-grandmother taught my mother to read using chalk and a black slate in León, where adobe brick buildings are whitewashed Spaniards in history. We brought with us red and blue macaws, panthers, and crocodiles. Tooling up and down Dolores Street hills, my papi rode a bicycle delivering lelas nacatamales. Back and forth from a clock tower at the end of Market Street, a renovated 1919 streetcar transplanted from Milan works tourist dollars. Advertisements from the late 60s posted behind True View plexiglass. I can't read a word of the Italian glitz, nor fathom the deep blue of the Mediterranean while sipping an ice-cold Coca-Cola. But there is a warm blanket on a wooden bench and a leather hand hook. Above a Cuban restaurant where waiters serve black bean hummus and chocolate croissants hangs the gay pride flag alongside a DirecTV satellite dish. Gabby walks to school. Pokemon cards in his pocket. Sanchez Street. I work in the kitchen with my Lela. Mariposa Avenue, Valencia Street, Camino Real are added to masa. Homemade tortillas puff into sweetness. I am not 1/3 Irish, 1/2 German, and 2 parts English with the little Cherokee thrown in. But last night, I couldn't translate the word hinge on every door that opens and closes to clouds beyond 4 walls. An old lady, perhaps Cambodian, Vietnamese, Korean, something of her own, hurries off the 31 Stockton, while my tia Teresa double parks in front of the mercados on 24th Street para los quesos y los chiles in the back room. One whiff and the world is not so small. Y yo tampoco me corro, after a poem by Cesar Vallejo, or Cesar Vallejo, Okay. On Thursday, I will not die in Paris or in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. But instead, Cesar, I will read your poem and wonder about black and white pebbles at the bottom of a fishbowl. How the antithesis of this life, a life we understand too little of, is death, filled with Thursdays and more of the same. Those translucent purple flowers at the end of a vine clamped shut as the moon filters through fog. Y yo tampoco me corro. I'll wait for autumn, the fire-spackled leaf, and the chorus of our loneliness below 3 stars. It is cold at night. Dios mío, skin and tequila, after a poem by Judith Ortiz Coffer. I have been shocked by yellow lemons. The heavy weight of wonder thunders down through sky, waiting still on crucified branches. El Espíritu Santo. Unquestionable grace spirited upon lovers, poets, and saints. In some versions of some stories, told in some way earnestly hard. 1/3 mystery in a Catholic prayer. Not a lover, but the love itself. The never being alone, complete union, body, breath, dancing to bebop or drum beat. I want to sit down on a bar stool, order a shot of tequila, lick a citrus slice, taste salt, and then the burning flame of love and light. Lorca's Rain. No te puedo decir. Sometimes I lose the words. El Caracol came from the onion skin pages of Lorca's collected works, a book found in a dresser drawer alongside sticky Polaroid photos, receipts from the cleaners, and a bottle of aspirin. My mother brought his poems from Nicaragua, along with the language woven through memory and distance. Now I speak Spanglish under a wet sky, while orange poppies lie low, holding the weight of water. Los caracoles in my garden grow fat from rain and are eating away an unidentified citrus. Will it turn out to be an orange or a lemon tree? And the succulent jade, the leaves all caracoled out, snail-bitten to pieces. Where do they hide their teeth? Then the rain on Sunday, forgiven again. Water can cleanse, dissolve mud-stained smears, and cast away what we do to ourselves. Those mistakes we fold past in order to move on. The poppies should dry out. Los caracoles will continue to grow. I have always loved my mother, even when language is not. When doubt commands a heavy sky, when a breath is hard to come by, I will put down words dressed in red, y palabras hechas para atrás.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Adela Najarro. Come and find us again. This has been the Central Coast Poetry Shows, and I'm your host, Jim Russo. Please find us again. Good night.